I was never the type to believe in the supernatural or, for that matter, even the overly dramatic stories about people seeing weird things at Walmart. It's just a store, right? Shelves of cheaply made products, the smell of stale popcorn from the snack bar, and late-night shoppers shuffling around in their pajamas. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that Walmart at 3 a.m. is an entirely different beast. And what happened that night is something I'll never forget. It started with a forgotten item. I'd just gotten home from a shift at the diner and realized I was out of coffee. No coffee, no life, that's my motto. I decided to drive to the Walmart a few miles away. It's one of those massive 24/7 supercenters, the kind of place where time feels like it stands still. I grabbed my keys, slipped on my hoodie, and headed out. The parking lot was nearly deserted when I pulled in. A few scattered cars sat under the flickering streetlights, their owners probably inside browsing the clearance aisle. The store itself looked like a ghost town, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above the empty checkout lanes. It's the kind of silence that feels oppressive, like something's watching you. But I brushed it off, just my imagination running wild because of the hour. I grabbed a basket and headed toward the coffee aisle. That's when I noticed the first weird thing. A shopping cart rolled by itself. I mean, it was subtle. It didn't zoom across the aisle or anything, but it was like it had purpose, like someone unseen was guiding it. I stopped in my tracks, waiting to see if maybe it was the air conditioning pushing it along. But the cart veered sharply to the left, bumped into a shelf of canned goods, and stopped. I laughed nervously. Okay, Walmart ghosts. Nice try, I muttered under my breath. I didn't have time for spooky nonsense. I just wanted my coffee. But the vibe had shifted. You know that feeling when the air feels thick, like you're underwater? I tried to shake it off and went back to my mission. That's when I heard it. A whisper. It came from the toy section, that creepy area near the electronics department where the shelves are always half empty, and the toys make weird noises when you walk past. At first, I thought it was just a kid. Maybe some late-night shopping parents had let their kid wander off. But as I walked closer, I realized the sound wasn't normal. It wasn't playful or random. It was deliberate. A low, guttural murmuring that seemed to stretch and wrap around the aisles like a thick fog. "Hello," I called out, gripping the handle of my basket tighter. The murmuring stopped instantly, like a record scratch. I should have left. Any normal person would have turned around, paid for their coffee, and gone home. But curiosity has a way of overriding survival instincts. I crept toward the toy aisle, my sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. When I turned the corner, I froze. A row of dolls lined the shelf. They were the cheap kind, with lifeless plastic eyes that seemed to follow you no matter where you stood. But it wasn't the dolls that stopped me. It was the shadow standing in the middle of the aisle. It was tall, too tall. Its outline was human, but its proportions were all wrong. Its arms too long, its legs spindly and bent at odd angles. The head was tilted unnaturally, as if it were examining something on the ceiling. But there was nothing there. I backed up slowly, trying not to make a sound. But then one of the dolls laughed. Not a sweet, innocent laugh. This was distorted, drawn out, and wrong. The shadow twitched, its head snapping toward me with a crack that echoed in the silence. And then it ran. Not away from me, toward me. The thing moved like a broken puppet, limbs jerking violently as it barreled down the aisle. My instincts kicked in and I bolted. I dropped my basket, my coffee mission forgotten. The shelves blurred past me as I sprinted toward the front of the store. Behind me, I could hear the thing's feet slapping against the floor, faster than I could ever hope to run. When I reached the checkout area, I stumbled. The lights above flickered wildly, casting everything in chaotic shadows. I glanced behind me, expecting to see the thing lunging for me. But it wasn't there. Instead, it was in the middle of the self-checkout area, standing perfectly still. Its head was tilted again, this time toward the automatic doors. And that's when I noticed something horrifying. The doors wouldn't open. I didn't waste time trying to figure out why. I ducked behind a checkout lane, my heart pounding in my chest. I peeked over the counter, praying the thing hadn't noticed me. But it had. Its head turned slowly, its eyeless face locking onto my hiding spot. It started moving again, its jerky, unnatural gait making my stomach churn. But then, just as it reached the lane I was hiding behind, it stopped. I held my breath, too scared to move. And then, it whispered, "Come back." Its voice was raspy, like nails dragging across metal. It wasn't a command, it was an invitation. I don't know how long I stayed crouched there, trembling and praying it wouldn't come any closer. But eventually, the lights stopped flickering, and the oppressive air lifted. I peeked over the counter again. The thing was gone. The automatic doors were working again. I didn't stick around to find out where it went or if it was coming back. I ran to my car, locked the doors, and sped out of that parking lot like my life depended on it. I never went back to that Walmart. To this day, I don't know what I saw or why it was there. But every now and then, when I'm lying in bed at night, I swear I can hear that voice again. Come back. A few days after that night, I told myself I'd imagined it all. Sleep deprivation, stress, maybe even a hallucination. I wanted to believe that's all it was. But deep down, I knew better. You don't imagine the way that thing moved or the sound of its voice. Still, life doesn't wait for you to process your trauma. Work was piling up, bills weren't going to pay themselves, and I couldn't afford to fall apart over some late-night Walmart nightmare. So I buried it, shoved it deep into the back of my mind, and carried on. But Walmart wasn't done with me. It started small, little things that were easy to brush off. One night, I noticed a cart sitting at the edge of my driveway. It was the same style as the ones from Walmart, complete with a wonky wheel. I figured some kids had been fooling around and left it there, so I pushed it to the curb and forgot about it. The next morning, it was back. Same spot, perfectly centered in my driveway. That's when the pit in my stomach returned. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe a neighbor's cart had rolled down the hill, or maybe the wind had moved it. I didn't want to think about the alternative, that it had been placed there. But when I got home from work that evening, the cart wasn't outside anymore. It was in my garage. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity, the memory of that night in Walmart rushing back like a freight train. My garage door had been locked. How did it get in there? The air felt heavy again, like it had in the store. My instincts screamed at me to get back in my car and drive. Anywhere but there. But instead, I grabbed a flashlight and scanned the garage, half expecting to see that shadow lurking in the corners. Nothing, just the cart. I pushed it out into the street, locked the garage, and double-checked every door and window in my house. Then I sat in my living room with every light on, clutching a baseball bat like it was my lifeline. That's when I heard the first knock. It was faint, almost polite, just a single knock on the front door. I froze, staring at the door from across the room. Another knock came, this one louder, more insistent. My grip on the bat tightened as I slowly stood up, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear my own breathing. And then came the whisper, "Come back." It wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from behind me. I spun around, the bat raised, and saw nothing. My living room was empty. The windows were shut, the curtains drawn. But the voice was so clear, so close. It sounded like it had been right in my ear. I stumbled backward, tripping over the edge of the rug and landing hard on the floor. My hands scrambled for the bat, and I swung wildly at the air around me, tears streaming down my face. And then I saw it. The shadow. It was standing in the hallway, just outside my bedroom door. It was even taller than I remembered, its limbs stretching unnaturally as it swayed back and forth like it was waiting for me to make the first move. Its head tilted again, and though it had no eyes, I could feel it watching me. "Come back!" It rasped again, the words drawing out like a death rattle. I bolted. I don't know where the sudden burst of courage came from, but I ran straight past the thing and out the front door, not stopping until I was in my car with the doors locked. I looked back at the house, expecting to see it standing in the doorway, but it wasn't there. Instead, the shopping cart was. This time, it wasn't empty. Inside the cart was a single item, a doll. The same cheap, plastic doll from the toy aisle in Walmart. Its lifeless eyes stared up at me, its mouth twisted into a crooked, mocking smile, and in its tiny, plastic hand, it held a crumpled receipt. The receipt wasn't mine. The timestamp was from 3 days earlier, 3 a.m., the same night I'd been at Walmart. And the name on the card used for the purchase? Mine. I didn't go home that night. I drove straight to my sister Claire's house across town. Claire had a reputation for being the practical one, the logical brain of the family. If anyone could talk me down from what I was feeling, it was her. I showed up at her doorstep at 1 a.m., wide-eyed and shaking. When she opened the door, I didn't even wait for her to ask what was wrong. I just burst into her living room and locked every door and window. "Okay, what the hell is going on?" she asked, arms crossed as she watched me pace back and forth like a caged animal. I told her everything: the shopping cart, the shadow, the doll, the receipt. At first, she gave me the look, the one she reserves for when she thinks I've lost my mind. But the more I talked, the more her expression changed. By the end of it, she wasn't skeptical. She was scared. "Did you call the police?" she asked. "And say what? That Walmart's haunted and some thing is stalking me? They'd lock me up." Claire was quiet for a moment, her fingers tapping nervously on the arm of the couch. "Okay, so you're saying this started at Walmart. Did anything weird happen before you got there? Like, before you walked in?" I thought back to that night. "No," I said, but even as the word left my mouth, a memory stirred. "Wait, there was this employee. When I walked in, there was a guy cleaning the floor near the entrance. He stopped and looked at me, not like a normal look. It was intense. He didn't say anything, just stared." Claire raised an eyebrow. "What did he look like?" I hesitated, trying to recall his face. That was the weird part. I couldn't. I remembered the way he stared, the way his hands gripped the mop handle so tightly his knuckles turned white. But his face, it was a blur, like my brain had deliberately erased it. "You don't think?" Claire started, but then shook her head. "Never mind." "Don't think what?" She glanced toward the window, as if she expected to see something staring back at her. "You're gonna think I'm crazy, but maybe it wasn't just Walmart. Maybe it was him, whoever that guy was." "Okay, and what? He followed me home? Hired a shadow demon to mess with me? That's insane." Claire sighed, rubbing her temples. "Look, I don't know what's happening to you, but you can't just sit here waiting for it to stop. You need answers." "Answers from who?" "Walmart customer service." I scoffed, but even as I joked, a sickening thought crept into my mind. I had to go back. The next night, I parked my car in the Walmart lot again. This time, I didn't feel the same sense of dread. I felt something else: anger. Whatever was happening to me wasn't going to stop unless I confronted it. If that shadow or that employee or whoever or whatever was responsible, I was going to find them. The store was just as empty as it had been before, the same fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above the aisles. I walked past the shopping carts by the entrance, each one seeming to whisper my name as I passed. My fists clenched and I kept walking. I started with the coffee aisle, retracing my steps from that night. The shelves were stocked neatly, the aisle empty. For a second, I felt foolish. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe I'd just been sleep-deprived, and my mind had conjured up the entire thing. But then I heard it. "Come back." The voice was faint, but it was enough to send chills down my spine. I turned, expecting to see the shadow lurking at the end of the aisle, but the aisle was empty. I spun around, my eyes darting toward the security cameras mounted on the ceiling. And then I saw him, the employee. He was standing at the end of the frozen food section, staring at me with the same intensity as before. But now something was different. His face wasn't blurred anymore. It wasn't human. His skin was too pale, almost translucent. His eyes were pitch black, like two bottomless pits that threatened to swallow me whole. And his smile, it stretched too wide, splitting his face in a way that no human jaw should move. I took a step back, but my feet felt like they were stuck in quicksand. He tilted his head, his body jerking unnaturally, and then he started walking toward me. No running. I turned and bolted, the air around me growing heavier with every step. The aisles blurred past me, the shelves twisting and contorting like they were alive. I could hear his footsteps behind me, faster and faster, until they sounded like they were right on top of me. I burst into the toy aisle, my chest heaving, and grabbed the first thing I saw, a baseball bat. As I turned around, ready to swing, the lights above flickered wildly, plunging the store into brief moments of darkness. And then he was gone. The store fell silent. The oppressive air lifted. I dropped the bat, my hands trembling, and ran for the exit. This time, the automatic doors opened without hesitation, and I didn't look back. When I got home, there was another receipt waiting for me on my kitchen counter. No shopping cart, no doll this time, just the receipt. The timestamp was from the moment I'd been in Walmart, and the name on the card? Mine. But this time, there was no list of items purchased. Just a single phrase, "See you soon." I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every creak of the house, every distant car passing on the street felt like a warning. The receipt sat on my kitchen counter, taunting me. I must have read those 3 words 100 times. See you soon. Who was you? The shadow? The employee? Both? Or something else entirely? The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't going to stop unless I put an end to it myself. I wasn't going to be the person who curled up in fear and let this thing destroy me piece by piece. If it wanted to see me, then fine. I'd let it. But it would regret the meeting. The next day, I prepared. I don't know what I thought I'd be fighting. How do you defend yourself against something that isn't human? But I didn't care. I packed a flashlight, a pocket knife, and a lighter. I didn't know if it would help, but having something, anything, made me feel like I had a fighting chance. I waited until nightfall. Claire begged me not to go back. "Whatever it is, it's not worth your life," she said, grabbing my arm as I stood by the door. "I can't keep running from this," I told her. "It's not just in Walmart anymore. It's following me. If I don't face it, it'll never stop." She let go, her eyes filled with tears. "Just promise me you'll come back." I nodded, though deep down, I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. When I arrived at Walmart, the parking lot was emptier than usual. No scattered cars this time, no flickering streetlights. Just my car, the oppressive silence, and the distant hum of the store's lights. I stepped out, clutching the pocket knife in my jacket, and walked through the automatic doors. Inside, the store was eerily quiet. No employees stocking shelves, no music playing over the speakers. It was like the building itself was holding its breath, waiting. I walked past the aisles slowly, listening for any sound, any sign of movement. The air was thick again, the kind of heaviness that presses down on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. And then I saw it. The employee. He was standing in the center of the toy aisle, his back to me. His head twitched slightly, his shoulders rising and falling in jerky, unnatural movements. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the store. "I'm not running anymore. You wanted to see me? I'm right here." Slowly, he turned. His face was the same as before, pale, hollow, inhuman. But his smile was wider now, stretching almost to his ears. He tilted his head, and for the first time he spoke. "Welcome back." His voice wasn't just a sound. It was a vibration, a low-frequency hum that rattled in my chest and made my teeth ache. Before I could respond, he raised one hand and pointed toward the end of the aisle. I turned to look, and my blood ran cold. The shadow was there, taller, darker, and more monstrous than I remembered. It wasn't just a figure anymore. It was a mass, a writhing, pulsating void that seemed to suck the light out of the air around it. And it was moving toward me. I stumbled backward, my flashlight shaking in my hand as I clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the shadow for just a moment. It recoiled, its form flickering like static on a broken TV. I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran, the flashlight bouncing wildly in my grip. The aisles twisted and stretched around me, shelves towering higher than they should, the store becoming an endless maze. I could hear the shadow behind me, a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. Somehow, I ended up in the electronics section. The TVs lining the walls flickered to life as I passed, each one displaying my face. My own reflection stared back at me, but the eyes weren't mine. They were black pits just like the employees. "Come back," the reflections whispered in unison, their voices overlapping in a haunting echo. "No!" I screamed, slamming the flashlight against one of the screens. The glass shattered, sparks flying, and for a brief moment, the whispers stopped. But the shadow didn't. It was there, in the broken reflection, its formless mass stretching toward me. I fumbled with the lighter in my pocket, my hands trembling as I flicked it on. The tiny flame felt insignificant against the overwhelming darkness, but it was all I had. "Stay back," I yelled, holding the flame out in front of me. The shadow paused, its edges flickering again. For a moment I thought it was retreating, but then it surged forward, enveloping me in its suffocating cold. The lighter fell from my hand, the flame snuffed out instantly. I felt myself being pulled, dragged down into the void. My screams were swallowed by the darkness, my body weightless, my mind spinning. And then, nothing. I woke up in the parking lot. The sun was rising, casting soft, golden light over the empty lot. My car was still there, the doors locked, my keys in my pocket. I sat up, my head pounding, my body aching like I'd run a marathon. I looked back at the Walmart. The automatic doors were closed, the lights inside flickering faintly. And then I saw the receipt. It was on the hood of my car, fluttering slightly in the morning breeze. My name was on it again, along with a single phrase, "Thanks for shopping." To this day, I don't know what happened that night. I haven't been back to Walmart, and I don't plan to. But sometimes, late at night, I hear whispers outside my window. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, my eyes don't look quite right. I don't know if I left that Walmart, or if a part of me stayed behind. I thought that would be the end of it. After waking up in the parking lot and seeing that receipt, I told myself I was done. No more Walmart, no more thinking about shadows, whispers, or faceless employees. I tried to rebuild my life, get back to normal. But the thing about trauma is it doesn't just leave you. It festers, creeping into every part of your mind, making you question everything. And sometimes, it doesn't let go. It started with the mirrors. The first time it happened, I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom. I glanced up, and for a split second, my reflection didn't move. I froze, staring at it, waiting for it to mimic me. It did, but just a beat too late, like it was lagging. I laughed it off, chalking it up to exhaustion, but it kept happening. Not just in the bathroom. Any reflective surface, windows, puddles, even the screen of my phone when it was turned off. My reflection wasn't mine anymore. It watched me, studied me, and the worst part? It was always smiling. Not a normal smile. It was that same stretched grin the employee had. Too wide, too wrong. I started avoiding mirrors altogether. I covered the ones in my house with blankets, smashed the compact in my purse, even stopped using my phone when it was dark enough for my reflection to show on the screen. But avoidance didn't help because then it started showing up in other ways. One night, I was in my bedroom, scrolling through my laptop in an effort to distract myself. It was late. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I thought I was finally starting to calm down, that maybe I'd turned a corner, and then I noticed the webcam light. It was on. I don't use my webcam ever. My heart dropped into my stomach as I stared at the tiny green light. Slowly, I reached out and covered it with my hand. But before I could close the laptop, the screen flickered. For a moment, I saw myself, my face, staring back at me through the webcam. But it wasn't my face, it was the other face. The smiling one. The one with black, empty eyes. And then the screen went black. I didn't sleep that night. I spent hours pacing the house. Every light turned on, every corner checked. But no matter how thorough I was, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there with me. Around 3 a.m., the whispers started again. "Come back." It was faint at first, like a breeze slipping through the cracks of a door. But it grew louder, closer, until it was all around me. The walls seemed to vibrate with the sound, the air thick with static. And then the lights went out. I grabbed my flashlight, the same one I'd taken to Walmart, and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the living room. Everything was as it should be, except for the shadow. It was standing in the corner, taller than before, its form shifting and pulsating like a living void. The sight of it made my knees buckle. I wanted to run, to scream, but my body wouldn't move. Tilted its head, and I swear I heard it chuckle. Then it spoke. "You never left." Its voice was deeper now, layered, like multiple people speaking at once. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I tried to reply, but my throat was dry, my voice gone. The shadow took a step toward me and then another. My flashlight flickered as the air grew colder, the room darker. I stumbled backward, my hand brushing against something solid. It was the baseball bat from Walmart. Without thinking, I swung it. The bat passed through the shadow like smoke, but the impact sent a shockwave through the room. The whispers stopped, the air shifted, and for a moment, the shadow flickered. But it didn't disappear. Instead, it lunged. The next few seconds were a blur. I remember the flashlight hitting the floor, the room spinning, the sound of my own screams blending with the shadow's guttural growl. And then, just as quickly as it had started, it was over. I was alone. When I woke up, the sun was streaming through the windows. The house was quiet, the air still. At first, I thought it was a dream, but the bat was still lying on the floor, dented and cracked. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, a text from Claire lighting up the screen. "Are you okay? Call me as soon as you see this." I grabbed the phone with shaky hands and called her. She picked up on the first ring. "You need to come over," she said, her voice trembling. "Now." When I got to Claire's house, she was pale, her eyes wide with fear. She didn't say a word as she handed me an envelope. My name was scrawled on the front in shaky handwriting. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was a picture of me, standing in the Walmart toy aisle. The timestamp on the bottom corner wasn't from my visit. It was from last night. But the worst part? I wasn't alone in the photo. The employee was standing behind me, his face twisted into that same awful grin. And beside him was the shadow, its form stretching toward me like it was ready to swallow me whole. I don't know how to end this story because honestly it hasn't ended. Every night I hear the whispers. Every day I catch glimpses of that shadow in places it shouldn't be. I've stopped going to Walmart. I've stopped going anywhere, because wherever I go, they follow. And now I'm starting to wonder if I'll ever truly leave Walmart, or if Walmart will ever leave me. I didn't leave Claire's house for days. We boarded up the windows, pushed furniture against the doors, and kept the lights on 24/7. I knew it was futile, whatever this thing was. It wasn't something you could block out with wood and nails. But we needed to do something, anything, to feel like we had some kind of control. But the whispers followed. They were in the walls, the vents, even in the hum of the refrigerator. They grew louder every night, and by the third night, Claire and I were both barely holding it together. She sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, while I paced the living room with the baseball bat in one hand and the flashlight in the other. "We can't keep doing this," she said finally, her voice trembling. "We have to face it." "Face what?" I snapped. "We don't even know what it is. It's not like I can just swing a bat at a shadow and call it a day." "Maybe not," she said quietly. "But you're forgetting something. This all started at Walmart. Maybe it ends there too." I wanted to argue, to tell her that going back was the worst idea imaginable. But deep down, I knew she was right. Whatever this thing was, it wanted me back at Walmart. It had been pulling me there from the start. If I didn't go, it would never stop. We drove to Walmart at 2:45 a.m. The parking lot was empty again, the store looming ahead like some kind of otherworldly monolith. The automatic doors opened as we approached, and the rush of cold air felt like stepping into a tomb. The store was silent. Not just empty silent. No buzzing lights, no faint hum of machinery. Just oppressive, suffocating quiet. We walked through the aisles, the beam of my flashlight bouncing off the shelves. I kept expecting to see the shadow or the employee, but there was nothing. No whispers, no flickering lights, just us. And then we reached the toy aisle. The doll was waiting. It sat in the middle of the floor, its lifeless eyes staring straight at me. Claire let out a shaky breath, stepping closer, but I grabbed her arm. "Wait," I whispered. The air around the doll shimmered, like heat waves rising from pavement on a summer day. And then, slowly, the shadow appeared. It rose from the ground like black smoke, growing taller and taller until it towered over us. Its form was even less human now, a mass of writhing darkness that seemed to consume the very light around it. Behind it, the employee stepped into view. His smile was gone now, replaced by something worse. A look of pure, predatory hunger. "Welcome back," he rasped, his voice layered and distorted. I took a step forward, gripping the bat tightly. "What do you want from me?" The employee tilted his head, his black eyes glinting. "You don't understand, do you? You never left. You've been here all along." My stomach twisted. "What are you talking about?" The shadow moved closer, its tendrils reaching out like claws. "This place," it hissed, "isn't just a store. It's ours. You walked in and now you're part of it. Forever." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "That's not true. I left. The employee laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that made my skin crawl. "You only think you did, but every time you leave, you come right back. Haven't you noticed? The receipts, the whispers, the mirrors. You're still here." I felt my legs weaken as the realization washed over me. Every night, every time I thought I was safe, I was still in the Walmart. It had me trapped, looping through its aisles, convincing me I'd escaped when I hadn't. But Claire was here with me. She was real. She had to be. I turned to her, desperate. "Claire, you believe me, right? This can't be real." But her face broke me. Her eyes were wide, tears streaming down her cheeks, but her mouth was moving silently. She was trying to say something, but no sound came out. And then, before I could reach for her, she dissolved into smoke. Gone. Just like that. "No!" I screamed, swinging the bat wildly at the shadow. "Give her back!" The shadow roared, its form swelling as it surrounded me. The employee stepped closer, his grin widening again. "You can't fight this. You're already ours." I swung again, my bat slicing through the void, but it was useless. The shadow wrapped around me, pulling me down into the floor, into the aisles, into the darkness. The last thing I saw was the employee's grinning face as he whispered one final time, "Thanks for shopping." When I opened my eyes, I was back in Walmart. The aisles were bright, the shelves neatly stocked. The clock on the wall read 8 a.m., and customers wandered the store like nothing had happened. I looked down at my hands, expecting to see blood or ash or anything to prove what I just experienced. But there was nothing. I walked to the front of the store in a daze, my heart pounding. The automatic doors opened, and sunlight spilled in. And that's when I saw it. The parking lot was full of cars. But the people? They weren't people. They were shadows, faceless and formless, moving in a strange, synchronized rhythm. The world outside wasn't the world I knew. It was their world, and I was part of it now. I never really left Walmart. And if you ever find yourself shopping late at night, be careful. If the lights flicker, if the air grows heavy, if a cart moves by itself, don't stay. Don't try to fight it, because once you're in, there's no way out.